We had an earthquake this morning in Southern California.
In Southern California, earthquake.
Not very big, but my wife woke me up at like 3 in the morning just to scare the crap out of me. And if I'm a little tired, it's part of the fun of living in this beautiful part of the country here.
Wow.
Every now and then the earth rumbles underneath you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good in good old Canada, Nova Scotia. Do you witness earthquakes often?
I'm going on 5 years out here, and there was one bigger one when my son was in the hospital and just after he was born, and I was driving on the 405. I was driving on the highway, and I didn't feel it at all, but my wife and my mother-in-law felt it, and they built the hospital on this like gimbal rig, and it shook, and the hospital shook.
Wow.
And they called me all excited, and I didn't feel it. This one I felt this morning. This one I felt.
Wow. So besides the
Yeah.
earthquakes, how's your career doing?
Things are good, man. I've been working a lot. We've had some strikes and things in Hollywood, which have been causing havoc down here, but I've been working, knock wood. Yeah, things are good. And since I'm talking to folks in Canada, it looks like the LA Kings are going to make the playoffs, shockingly enough. I'm a huge hockey fan. And we've got like 18 games left, so unless they royally screw it up, we're actually going to make the playoffs, which never happens. So.
And what's your favorite Canadian team?
My favorite Canadian team? Oh, that's a loaded question. I don't like the Sens at all. My favorite Canadian team? Edmonton, I guess.
Oh, Edmonton Oilers. All right.
Is that okay?
The good old Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, there you go. Well, back in the day, I played when Gretzky got traded, in the 80s. It was a big deal, when he got traded out here.
Any movies you've been producing that's not released yet?
I have a movie that's just coming out on Vanguard, which is a small label. It's a movie called Big Heart City. Really, really proud of that movie. We opened 2 summers ago at Cinevegas in Las Vegas, and then we played the LA Film Festival. It stars Seymour Cassel. Those of you who are connoisseurs of indie film will know him. Younger generations will know him from Rushmore and those type of movies, Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. And Seymour Cassel is an icon of the John Cassavetes movies, in the 60s. And Oscar-nominated actor. He's one of our stars. And then Sean Andrews, who was in Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused.
Okay.
That's where he came to prominence. And this is a really great movie that we made for really very little money, all handheld, and it's sort of the gritty, concrete and darker side of Los Angeles. And played the festival circuit. We also played the LA Film Fest, had a great turnout there. And we're just coming out. I think we come out next month on DVD, that one. We're really, really proud of that movie. Big Heart City's the name.
Now, how do you guys film your movies these days? Like digital or with the actual film still?
I just got off the phone with a director that I'm producing a movie for him. And he is shooting on film. And the reality is that, and that's a great question, because more and more these days, the films that I work on are shot digital. And the RED camera is probably the most popular camera. RED is, the camera that is the most popular digital camera, I would say, for the independent artist. The Panavision Genesis is the most popular digital camera for like a studio film, because Panavision is, if you watch an old James Bond movie from the 60s with Sean Connery and you see like a behind the scenes, you'll see the Panavision cameras. Panavision has its roots in Hollywood forever, and that's their digital version. And so if you want to get a camera, with years of sort of Hollywood behind it, that's Panavision. RED is brand new, but that's a long-winded way of saying mostly we shoot digital these days, and very few times do you have people that's shooting on film, on the actual celluloid.
And do you film everything like in 1080p and stuff like that?
Yeah, you do. I think sometimes it depends on what your output's going to be too. Like I've had some times where we do it on 720, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably the least technical filmmaker you're going to talk to, but I just did a web series and I shot a pilot for that. And because our deliverable, we're just going to be showing it on the web. I think that was something that we ended up doing 720 because besides showing it at film festivals and stuff, the end product is not going to be on a high def television. It's going to be just streaming on the web.
Now you heard that the old films, like the old reels and stuff, it's like what 5000p times 5000. We're not even at that quality yet.
Oh, you're talking about like what Celluloid gives you. Yeah, that's the thing about film. I mean, film can really give you some amazing looks that you can't really get. I'm a big fan of Robert Rodriguez. I'm just rereading his book Rebel Without a Crew, and if anybody's out there who's an independent filmmaker and want to get inspired, I would recommend reading that book. And he shot obviously El Mariachi on film, but he did Once Upon a Time in Mexico on video, and he talks about film is dead. Obviously film is not dead. What the silver emulsion can do to somebody's face, and the textures it can give you in a sunset, and the softness it can get, even on the very best digital, it's a different look. There's some amazing things that digital can do. If you look at what Michael Mann has done with digital in Collateral, Miami Vice, which wasn't a great story, but it looked cool.
Mm-hmm.
He does some really cool stuff with digital, where he's using the medium on purpose, like he's using what's cool about digital. But yeah, celluloid, it's kind of like the argument of vinyl and digital,
yeah.
in music, right?
Do you think one day
you can't recreate it yet? I mean, if they ever get to the point where digital can do that, then I think you can make the argument that film is dead. But I don't think film will ever be dead.
Do you think one day the TV is going to match up to that quality of those old films?
Well, I mean, it's incredible how much TV has jumped, so quickly. So I would never say never, because it's amazing to me that I have a 1080 machine in my house, and the surround sound system that I have, I have a pretty big system, And it's funny because I live in Burbank, which is like the media capital of the world,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talk about Hollywood, but really you come over the hill, and most of everything that comes out of Johnny Carson, right? Beautiful downtown Burbank. And our AMC, our movie theater, like they cut it up into little screens, and you go in there, and the screens are really tiny for a movie theater because they cut it up in like a 16-plex, and it's not that big compared to like how big my TV is,
Mm-hmm.
And I think eventually it's going to get to the point where you can just you just match what you can get in the theater in your house. I still think, because there's an argument too about whether or not people will not, whether people will be going to the theater. I think there's a communal aspect of going to the movies with a group of people, like opening night of a big movie, and like,
Mm-hmm.
And everybody like gasps at the same time, and like an action movie or cheers or whatever. I think there's that like people want to be with a group. It's like you want to be in a crowd and feel the excitement of, it's like going to a concert or like experiencing something with a group. I think there's that communal aspect of a theater, obviously, that you will, get if you're watching in your living room in your pajamas and you hit pause to take a phone call or something. So I don't think you'll ever replace that. But
well, that's a good point. Yeah. Let's say, as a producer, who do you pick out for your music, like to go into the films? Is it a long process to find the right music and how to deliver it in there?
There's a couple different ways that I go about looking for music. The first movie I ever did, that I ever did was I was writer, director, producer, and I'm an independent. So I don't sort of represent any sort of studio in what I do. And this is before we had social networking, like MySpace and all the ways that people can put their bands up and easily. I had a web page up, and I was looking for musicians, and I put a backstage ad out looking for the actors who were going to be in the movie, and had all different independent bands submit. So there's ways to look, at your sort of your local bands. Mostly now, what we're doing is I have relationships with local music labels, and so I usually have a composer on board and a music supervisor, and that's relationships with local bands or local labels, and they'll be submitting projects and new artists at different times to me, with like a music sampler saying, these are our new bands, our new singer-songwriters that we came on board this month. World's End Music puts out one every couple months, and I usually get their sampler and check it out, and might say, oh, let me get the album for these guys. I like this sound, kind of thing. And that's placing pre-recorded music that's on an album. And there's two different types of music within a movie. There's source music, and then there's score. Source is sort of music that's within the world. Like if the characters are listening to the radio, or if they're whatever, the music is motivated within the scene somehow. If the band is playing the music or whatever, it's on television or something, you can recognize that that's happening there. And then there's score, which is the emotional undercurrent music, like they walk into a room and it's dun dun, that kind of stuff. And so you work with a composer to find those points that you want to put in some sort of emotional beats to add to the drama or the tension or the whatever underlying current of emotion you want there. What I found on my earlier stuff was I was using a lot of pre-recorded music from bands that I was finding. My personal musical taste, and I know I'm talking on a metal show, is sort of like singer-songwriter stuff, acoustic stuff. That's just my own personal musical taste. But I got all sorts of submissions from all different kinds of bands, and I found that I had a group that sent me like some sort of like goth-inspired stuff, and I had some electronica stuff, and I had some like hard metal stuff. And when I wanted to introduce the older brother, who was like this like jerk who like drove in like on his Porsche, and I used this like driving like dun, 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 like it was a cue, and you have a physical, emotional, a reaction, and I just used a little bit of it, and then I kind of recalled that as I went through throughout the movie. Now I would probably be working with a composer, and I would just be talking to him in more emotional terms, saying things like, this is this character, this is what I need the characters to be feeling, and this is what's happening in the scene, and then come back a little bit later and see something placed in there. The other way that you can do it, which is very common as well, is, and I don't like to do this as much because there's a thing called temp love, where you can take, some very popular compositions, and I mean I could name some really, really classic ones like Star Wars, right. Dun 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 dun, or Jaws, dun 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 dun, you could take those. I mean, those are like extremely popular. You could take like maybe Batman or even I'm a huge Bond fan, and I love what John Barry's done or whatever. And you could drop those into some scenes and see how the emotional elements register from composers that you've seen before, you've listened to before. The problem there is that you might go, oh my God, no one can do it as good as John Barry when you're listening to other people, And the problem is, yeah, I mean, John Barry's like freaking great, I mean, there's a reason why he's John Barry. So I don't like to do that as much. I did that on a film once, and it killed me to take the big names out and replace it, So I'd rather just, start from scratch with the music that once I start to marry it with the scene and start to feel it in there, let it sort of mingle and become one. Because I think that the relationship with music and the visual, as you know, can be so powerful.
Now, going to sound effects, let's say somebody's closing a door. Do you overdub that, or is it the actual door closing?
It's funny because what you have to do is you actually have to create an M&E track for your movie, and for sound effects, you have to do all of that as a separate track, totally separate. Even if you got a really great door close sound effect on location, if it's married at all with the dialogue. So if somebody goes like, hey, stop, and then the door closes or whatever, you have to basically go in and strip that out. And if you're working with a really good post-audio house, they'll basically go and strip out all of your sound design, what they call that, and they'll rebuild it all with a Foley artist. And it'll be a guy like wearing tapped shoes and have like a cup of sand and stuff, and like he'll watch it on screen, and like people are kissing, and he kisses the back of his hand, and he breaks a glass, and he does all the stuff that's happening on screen, and he recreates that. And the reason why they do that is because if you have any chance of your movie getting sold, the Canadian market is a good example because you'd probably have it in French and English, or if you're going to sell it overseas, or North American, and you're going to get it in Mexico, and you want the Spanish language track,
Yeah.
You want to have all the sound be there. You don't want to have to redo the car door slamming 5 times. You want that track of all that stuff to just be there, and then you bring the actors in, and they re-voice in all the different languages, whatever, stop, arrête, or whatever, do it all in French, and then, you know what I mean? Do it all again in Spanish. And that way you have all your different, so when you're on your DVD and you press the button to select the different languages, if you listen, all the sound design, all that other stuff is all the same. It doesn't change.
Even on the old films that were made, is it still just like that? Or you're talking about basically now?
Well, I don't know exactly how they did it on the old films. I can tell you that there was not a lot of care done on the old films when they were going onto video, and I would probably say there was probably not a lot of care done when they were originally going to DVD either. A good friend of mine who is a real big cinephile, he loves old black and white movies. And as a filmmaker, I probably don't watch enough movies older films as I should. I mean, I've seen some of the classics, of course. But he met with a guy who worked at MGM, and when they were originally taking the old movies, and remember before DVDs, everything was video. In the 80s, it was like videotape, You went to the video store, you got your tape, and you brought it back, you had to rewind it and all that, It's like if you have younger viewers, they don't know what we're talking about, right? But
the good old VHS tapes.
yeah, the old VHS tapes, right? Be Kind, Rewind, and all that,
Yeah.
And what they would do is your TV was 4:3, and the movies were shot 16:9, and they weren't letterboxed on the VHS tapes. So you'd get a movie, like even Star Wars, which to me is a classic film, the original Star Wars, right? Very influential film for me as a filmmaker, and when I was growing up, it was like this movie that was so amazing. I saw it on television before I ever saw it in a theater. And Darth Vader comes in and he's talking. He's like, where is Princess Leia? He's talking to this guy in the very first scene. On the TV, you don't see who he's talking to. And it was called Pan and Scan.
Right.
And it's because they were making a choice because it didn't fit. It was basically a rectangle trying to fit into a square. And there was a guy, it was like a 20-year-old kid who was paid $5 an hour to do the Pan and Scan. They didn't give it to anybody with any notes or anything. They gave them classic movies and had them doing that, just get it done because we got to get this stuff out on video. We're making money. And so my assumption would be that they probably didn't put a lot of care on these old movies to get them onto DVD, or maybe they just did another track of the M&E, and on the English version, they kept the sound of, it's unfortunate. It's like when records went to CD that first time, and like all the labels were like red, they were white with like red lettering on the left, and you lost all the artwork from the records. I mean, you had all that great LP and had like all that artwork. And that first batch, when they had to go from records to CDs, there were so many records that had to be turned into CDs. You lost so much of the art. And if you found any old LPs, or at a garage sale, or if you're a collector, and you own the CD, you're like, wow, I didn't know that this had such cool like liner notes and like the inside of the jacket's so cool. 'Cause my CD doesn't have any of this. It's that same kind of thing. You lost the care, I think. So I would make that assumption.
Now, going to vocal overdubs, is every word in your films overdubbed, or is it the actual same thing like the effects?
No, actually, as an independent, you have to kind of pride yourself on the fact. You have to kind of pride yourself on the fact that you get your audio on location. And the reason being that it costs a lot of money to go back in the studio and do the ADR, additional dialogue recording or looping. In the movie Big Heart City, which is the one I mentioned before, we did no looping at all. And it was part of our credo. We said, we're going to shoot this movie, and we're going to almost shoot it like a documentary. So there's a couple scenes that are a little noisy, and if we were going to get a theatrical release, we probably would have had to do looping. Mm-hmm. But we're going to DVD, and we passed QC, which is quality control. On a movie I did called Float. Do you guys get 24, the series 24?
Yeah.
With Kiefer Sutherland.
Good show.
Is he Canadian? Is Kiefer Canadian?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. So we had Greg Itzen from 24 as one of our stars, and Ken Davidian from Borat, and a great little movie called Float. And that movie we did a lot of looping, and it was just the fact that we shot in like an ice cream store, and we couldn't turn off the ice cream machines. We kept turning them off, and the ice cream was melting, mm-hmm. and we were getting worried that we were going to get charged extra because we were renting the store, And so we were shooting with the ice cream machines plugged in, the coolers going bzzz. And so when you get the vocals back, you're hearing the people talk, and you're hearing a buzz, So we brought them back into the studio. The problem, and rightly so for actors, is when they're trying to recreate a performance and they're not standing next to the other actor and they're in a booth, they're not, it doesn't feel as genuine, it doesn't feel as real. And you can do things to modulate and make the sound feel like it's in a big room or something, but if you get too much looping, an actor's they're gonna turn on you. They're not gonna be happy. And so you try as a producer to create an environment where you get most of your location for two reasons: performance and cost.
Well, Peter, I don't know how much to thank you for all this information you supplied us tonight. Really good stuff.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Well, you have a good night, and this is going to be a great interview.
Thanks so much, Jason.